I'm Shane, and this is how I made a metal rose. So over the past year, I've taken note from The Bachelor, and I've made different kinds of roses by ways of 3D printing and woodworking. And this year, I wanted to take it up a notch. So, I decided to make a rose out of steel. Here's what I did. So what I used for this project was some sheet metal. You can go anywhere between 18 and 22 gauge. That seems to be the sweet spot. And my sheet that I used was around 12 inches by 12 inches. And for the stem, you're just going to need a tent stake or some sort of thin metal rod, whatever you have lying around really. Now for tools. Number one is your safety. Of course, gloves, glasses, hearing protection, and preferably long sleeves. Other tools used was a bandsaw, but if you don't have that, you feel free to use an angle grinder, tin snips, or shears. I'd say that tin snips are the bare minimum for this project though. Other than that, use drill, pliers, a butane torch. You can also use propane. I use oil. I use canola oil. Vegetable oil and motor oil should also work, but if you're using motor oil, do it in a very, very well ventilated space because when it's heated, it releases lots of carcinogens. Now be sure to have a container to hold the oil. It's going to get very hot. You don't want anything aluminum or plastic warping on you as soon as that hot oil gets in there. And you're going to need some sort of metal bonding adhesive. Mine was welded, but you can also use epoxy or putty depending on what you have on hand. I started by dividing my sheet metal into 4 quadrants. Then, in each of those 4 quadrants, I marked the center and I used a compass to make concentric circles. They could all be the same size or from large to small, it's really up to preference. Then, I drilled out the center of each circle with a bit the size of my stem. Then I cut all the circles out on the saw. After that, I marked perpendicular lines across the middle of each circle. While cutting lines, I was sure to leave around a 1/4 inch radius around the center hole untouched. Then I bent the petals to look like a fan. This allows room for the tin snips to get in and make precise cuts. Lastly, with the tin snips, I cut deep rounded edges to make each quarter look like a petal. After I deburred all my edges, it's time for bending. Take note that hot or cold bending doesn't make a difference when working with thinner metal. It's just easier to go with cold because it's just less danger. So I started with wrapping the innermost petal tightly, then moved in a circular pattern wrapping each petal halfway over the other. I added the next petal onto the stem and then repeated the process. Try to make it look natural and have fun with it. I noticed the bottom of the petal looked boxy, so I put it on a non-scratching surface and hammered the corner down a bit. When satisfied, you could place it in a vise and apply steel bonder. I tried this, but my epoxy didn't set up correctly, probably due to a bad mixture, so I asked a welder at my work to tack weld the flower to the stem for me. Note that if you use a glue, you can't glue the steel after because the heat will probably affect the bond. If it doesn't, carry on. Now for the finishing, you could easily leave it as it is or apply some sort of oil rust preventer or even put an automotive enamel on it, but I prefer bluing. Bluing is the process of heating it up to the point where it changes color and then dunking it in oil directly after to cool it off. This acts almost like a seasoning of a cast iron pan where it burns the oil directly to the surface of the metal, giving it a really pretty bluish blackish finish while also providing rust resistance. So to blue metal, like I said, you're just going to need to heat the metal up with the torch until it changes color. But not until red hot. If it turns red, the bluing will start to flake off as soon as it comes out of the oil. When it's fully heated, dunk the piece into a steel container of oil that is slightly bigger than the piece and can hold the displaced fluid once you dunk it. You don't want the hot sizzling oil spilling over the edge. And the oil can be any cooking oil, but be careful if you're using motor oil. Like I said, when it's heated up, it can release really bad carcinogens, which is bad stuff, into the air. When the piece is cooled, remove it from the oil and set it aside to rest and drain. It still can have a coating of oil on it. If you don't like that, rinse it in water and dry it off. And there you go. Please let me know if you've enjoyed, and I'll see you again soon.